We are down to the final 2 weeks of our top 10 countdown of the greatest championship matches in Royal Rumble history. Last week, number 3 in the countdown was the ladder match for the Intercontinental title from Royal Rumble 2001 with Chris Benoit defending against Chris Jericho. I called that pay-per-view maybe the greatest Royal Rumble pay-per-view of all time. Top to bottom, Rumble pay-per-view, maybe the best they've ever done. I said it was neck and neck with 2000. And on that 2000 show, the Acolytes challenged the New Age Outlaws for the WWF Tag Team Championship. Chris Jericho and Chyna defended their Intercontinental title. Yes, this was during that ridiculous period where they were co-champions. Much like the swimsuit contest on that same show, it is best to forget that that ever happened. But there was one other championship match on that show. A match that I have said repeatedly in the past is the match that cemented Triple H's status in my eyes as a top guy in WWE. It was a street fight for the WWF Championship with Triple H defending against the hardcore legend Cactus Jack. The first time was in that very same building, Madison Square Garden, on an episode of Raw in 1997 against the very same opponent, Triple H. And this match from Royal Rumble 2000 is number 2 in our countdown of the greatest championship matches in Royal Rumble history. Now, creatively, let's give some backstory here. Creatively, 2000, in my opinion, is WWE's greatest year. I call it the Chris Kresge year. I've talked about Chris Kresge on the podcast before. When Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara left for WCW in late 99, Kresge was hired to take over. He became the lead creative voice in that company. He had been a writer for MTV. He had been a head writer for The Daily Show. And they lured him over to WWE. And in WWE, he became known and mocked by some for storyboarding things and mapping things out through the use of storyboards, which was a practice in television that was commonplace. It wasn't commonplace in pro wrestling. But in television, it was commonplace. You did storyboards to keep track of storylines in a more coherent way, in a more organized way. Now, by the end of that year in 2000, Stephanie McMahon had taken his place. The creative voice that she is. She had taken his place. He stayed with the company, I think, for a couple more years, and then he either left or got fired. He passed away, unfortunately, from what I believe was brain and lung cancer in 2005. He is one of the unsung heroes of this period for WWE. Again, he wasn't the only writer, but he was the lead writer. And he brought a very unique way of doing things to the company that, if you were just an on-air observer, clearly worked. Because, again, I thought, creatively speaking, it was overall their best year for the company. And it was also a period of transition, in a way, with Steve Austin being out of the picture, because Stone Cold, his neck was deteriorating. He needed to have neck surgery. He had the neck surgery. It was going to keep him on the shelf for a very long time. Austin originally thought he'd make it back in 3 or 4 months. This was before people started to realize that this spinal fusion thing is going to take a year or longer. Austin thought, well, I'll be back, in a few months. And he did make it back a lot sooner than other people who had the same kind of surgery came back, which might have been a bad thing. It might have actually shortened his career. But Austin was out of the picture. And he was inarguably, big as The Rock was, he was inarguably the biggest star in the company. Bigger than The Rock. The Rock was very popular. He was a very capable person of replacing Austin. They were very fortunate that The Rock was on their payroll and as popular as he was, because they would have been in a lot of trouble if they didn't have The Rock as a backup to Stone Cold. But he was no Stone Cold. And with Austin out, everybody else had to step up also. No two people more so than The Rock and Triple H. They carried the company on their back in the year 2000. Those two not only carried the company until Austin came back, but when he did come back, by that point, they were made men. And then you had Mick Foley. Foley, one of the most important pieces of the Attitude Era. Foley was winding down. He was planning to retire. But before he did, he wanted to help put over Triple H. And in the build-up to this match, the McMahon-Helmsley faction fired Mankind after he lost a pink slip on a pole match to The Rock. That led to The Rock coming out, I think, the next week, and threatening a revolt. He was threatening a locker room walkout if they did not rehire Mankind, which they did. Then on Raw, Triple H pedigreed Mankind during a match. He pedigreed him through the announce table and left him all bloody. And this led to Foley walking out on SmackDown. His shirt, everything was still blood-stained. He hadn't showered. He hadn't changed. And he walked out there in his Mankind gear before revealing underneath his Cactus Jack shirt. He pulled the Mankind mask off, ripped off the bloody white dress shirt, revealed the Cactus Jack t-shirt. The look on Triple H's face was priceless. His jaw dropped. They really sold the fact that this Cactus Jack guy, he's a sick son of a bitch. And the things that he would do is beyond anything that anybody in WWE had ever seen. And that led to this match. It led to Cactus Jack challenging Triple H for the championship at the Rumble. Fast forward to the match. Madison Square Garden, New York City. Foley is treated like a god there. Stephanie comes out with Triple H. She kisses him. She goes to the back. Again, they want to sell how dangerous this match is. Can't have a lady out there. So she goes to the back. I remember watching this match, and I remember so badly wanting to see Cactus get a token run with that title. I thought he had a real shot. I knew that he was winding down. I had read, that he was winding down, and I thought they're going to reward him by giving him a championship win. Maybe he'll drop it the next month or he'll drop it at WrestleMania, but I thought he had a real shot, and I was really cheering him on to win this match. And they went on to have one of the best street fights in company history. Triple H suffered a very nasty gash on his calf very early in the match. He took a suplex onto a wooden pallet and sliced his leg open. I remember watching the post-match footage, probably from the DVD, of them stitching up the wound. It looked like it just took a whole chunk out of his leg, and it was pretty nasty. And anyway, Foley introduced the baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, which at first it was the real deal. It was real barbed wire. Triple H used it on Foley. You could see the barbed wire sticking to the shirt. Eventually, Earl Hebner took the bat away, and he had them store it underneath the Spanish announce table, which is kind of an odd place to put a barbed wire baseball bat, but there's a reason for this. So they store it under the table, right? Later on now, Foley wants to know where the bat is. He's furious. Where's my bat? And he goes over to the Spanish announce table. He's threatening the announcers. They say, okay. And they reach under the table, and they pull out a barbed wire baseball bat. This one, though, looks a little bit different. It looks a little bit different, and the reason for that is this is the fake one. Real bat, fake barbed wire. This time it was Triple H taking the abuse with the phony barbed wire. This was the rubber tipped, which I'm pretty sure is the same kind of barbed wire that Sandman used when he went to WCW. He was Hack. Pretty sure it was rubber tipped barbed wire that he was using. But anyway, so that's when Triple H started getting hit with it, and he bladed, and he's bleeding all over the place. And I know that bothers some people, the fact that, it took it down a notch because it was fake barbed wire. It didn't bother me. I mean, I don't care. If it's me, they would never use real barbed wire. I think it's sick. I think it's barbaric. But it didn't ruin the match. The idea that, it looked phony or it's not real barbed wire. Who cares? You know what I mean? Look, I know as well as anybody that there are things on my show that I can nitpick about and all that, and I complain about this, that, and the other. But even I look at these things sometimes, and I say to myself, the things that I find that people complain about, it's like, give me a break, Anyway, so that didn't bother me at all. And I'm sure most people in the crowd that night sure did notice. On TV, maybe they did, but in the crowd, they didn't notice. So Triple H took a beating in this thing, not just his leg, but there was another point where Foley gave him a pile driver on top of the announce desk. The table didn't break. That looks like it sucked for him. Triple H, he's bleeding a gusher here, bleeding all over the place. He did handcuff Foley's hands behind him. in a callback to the match, the I Quit match that Foley had the year before this, actually, with The Rock, when he was defenseless, had his arms handcuffed behind him, took 15 chair shots to the head like a crazy man. So they were doing the callback to that match here with the handcuffs. Thankfully, he didn't take as many chair shots to the skull, maybe 2 of them this time. And as they're brawling down that short MSG aisleway, The Rock made a very brief cameo. He came out from behind it wasn't a curtain, it was like a door. And he walloped Triple H over the head with a chair. That gave time for the police officer nearby to uncuff Foley's hands from behind his back. Later, Foley pulled out his giant sack of thumbtacks from under the ring. Triple H is in the ring. All the tacks are spread all over in the corner of the ring. And Triple H is doing the teeter spot where he's teetering backwards. And Foley is punching him. And it looks like Triple H is going to fall backwards. And Foley punches him. And finally, Foley charges in at him. And Triple H back body drops him onto the thumbtacks. Now, Stephanie came out by this point. She had run back down to the ring, very concerned for her husband, the man who drugged her and married her against her will. Or was that all just a ruse? I actually don't remember that part. If they revealed that the entire thing was a hoax, or if Stephanie just decided later on that, hey, I like this guy, I want to stay with him, and betray my father. I actually don't remember now if the whole thing was a hoax or not. But anyway, poor Test. That's the real story there. Poor Test. He's the one who not only got shafted at the altar, he never had so much as a singles match out of it against Triple H as revenge for what he did to him. That guy got screwed. Anyway, Triple H hits a pedigree. Cactus kicks out. And Jim Ross freaks out. One of the other great things that makes this match so great is the announcing of Jim Ross. I know grass is green, water is wet. I know, but it had to be said. He did a great job here. So the building exploded. When he got that shoulder up, the place went nuts. And they started a very loud Foley chant before one of the most violent finishes to a WWE match ever. It wasn't somebody getting sliced open. Nobody got stabbed or shot or anything like that. But it is one of the more violent finishes that you will ever see in a WWE match, in that Triple H gives Foley stumbles over into the corner. And Triple H, and this could not have been fun for him either, by the way. Yeah, I mean, Mick Foley took the craziest bump of bumps here, but this could not have been fun for Triple H either, because he had to land knees first on these things. But he gave Cactus Jack a pedigree face first down onto the thumbtacks. And finally, Triple H scores the 3 count. You know that Earl Hebner was looking down on that mat when he had to go down to make that count, going, fuck my life, as he counted 3. I think it would be a miracle if he didn't get at least one of those tacks stuck in his hand, counting that fall. Triple H had knee pads on, but he had tacks stuck in his knee pads. He had tacks stuck in the soles of his boots. He had tacks sticking out of his legs. He had a wound on his leg. There might have been a thumbtack that went into the hole in his leg, for all we know. He was a bloody mess by the time this thing was finally over. Foley had tacks sticking out of his face and above his eye. I can remember reading how upset Vince McMahon was. Vince McMahon was very upset with the finish of this match. Not that it didn't work. It worked beautifully. But he had not either known of that or approved of that pedigree on the tacks. He approved of the back bump, but he did not approve of the pedigree. Foley could have gone blind. He could have gotten a thumbtack in the eyeball, and he could have gone blind on that spot. I mean, you get slammed face down on thumbtacks. You got to be either sick, stupid, or both to think of something like that, let alone agree to do it. It's one thing to conceive of the idea, but then to volunteer to do it. Hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you slam me down face first onto a bunch of thumbtacks? And it was his idea. It had to be his idea. So Triple H does a stretcher job. Foley chases him down in the aisle, wheels him back down to the ring, dumps him into the ring, and gives him one last parting shot to the head with the barbed wire bat. Triple H was all kinds of fucked up when this match was over. In the back, while they're working on his leg and they're, stitching him up, he tells somebody to go off into the crowd and tell his parents that he's okay. You can imagine what they were thinking when that match was over. I would say Mick Foley did more than maybe anyone else, any other one single person, to put Triple H over and make him a superstar. If he was a star, he went from star to superstar when this match was over. Yes, Triple H was buddy-buddy with Shawn Michaels, and that helped, especially when Michaels retired and Triple H got to take over DX version 2. That was the first time we saw him positioned as a leader and not a follower. And yes, working with The Rock also helped a lot. Rock, that was huge for Triple H's career, as it was for The Rock's, because they were the two young stars on the rise at that time. They were competing for the same spot, right? Both very driven by competition and driven probably by a lot of jealousy, at least from Triple H's side. I always felt like, Triple H was jealous of The Rock and the success he had as quick as he had it. Rock was headlining WrestleMania in 1999, not very long, 2 years or so maybe after he made his debut. Triple H had been in the company since 95. He hadn't sniffed a WrestleMania main event. You mean to tell me there wasn't any professional jealousy there between those two? Especially from Triple H's end? You've heard the stories going into WrestleMania 15. Shawn Michaels and Triple H politicking and lobbying behind the scenes, trying to convince Vince McMahon that Rock wasn't ready to be in that position, to be in a WrestleMania main event, lobbying for Mankind instead to take his place. Thank God Vince, his voice won out, and they didn't do that. And we were able to get the kickoff to the Rock Austin feud, which turned out to be one of the great feuds in company history. But you can't convince me that there wasn't, and maybe even on some level still is, but certainly back then, that there wasn't any jealousy of The Rock and his push from the Triple H side. 100% there was. You can't tell me there wasn't some resentment there. Especially now, you look at how big of a star The Rock has gone on to become. But Rock and Triple H's careers will forever be linked. They will forever be intertwined. But it was Mick Foley as Mankind first, and then later on as Cactus Jack, and the matches that he had with Triple H, those hardcore matches he had with Triple H, that really gave him the edge that he needed, I think, to be taken seriously as a world champion and a main event player in that company. His physique changed around that time dramatically. Year 2000 Triple H, I think, is still the best version of Triple H. Physically, I know he got a lot bigger and more cut up later on, probably too much. But this, to me, was his physical peak. This was pre-quad tear Triple H. But the Royal Rumble was supposed to be it for Mick Foley. He was supposed to come in, do the match with Triple H, lose, and call it quits. He agreed to do one more match against Triple H the following month at No Way Out. That was the Hell in a Cell match where he took the gimmick bump through the top of the cell down through the ring. And as a result of that loss, as per the stipulation, he was forced to retire. And he did. Until they figured out, well, we actually want to have a McMahon in every corner for WrestleMania. And so he was back a few weeks later as Linda McMahon's surrogate in the Fatal 4-Way at WrestleMania 2000. New haircut, crappy new haircut, and everything, because he thought he was retired, so he went and got his haircut. He didn't think he was coming back so soon. Then they called him into action, and he went on to have a very forgettable performance in a Fatal 4-Way match that, unfortunately, saw him very embarrassingly miss a diving elbow off the ropes onto the announce desk. And he collided with the side of the announce desk, which I guarantee you was not supposed to happen. That was not his plan when he vaulted himself through the air. And it was embarrassing. Look, shit happens, right? But hey, a paycheck is a paycheck. And hopefully he got a good payday for coming back and doing that match. And that wouldn't be Foley's last match either. That Triple H guy, meanwhile, I think he went on to do okay for himself.